He bought an abandoned windmill on a lonely Oregon hill for just 5,000. Its blades broken, gears rusted, and whispers of a curse carried by every gust of wind. Michael Grant, a weathered carpenter with calloused hands and a heart haunted by failure, thought he was just buying a forgotten ruin to fix. But buried beneath its rotting floors lay a secret sealed since World War II, blueprints of a lost invention that could change the world. What began as one man's search for redemption became a fight for truth, legacy, and the power hidden in the wind. But before we begin, tell us, where are you watching from? The fog rolled in from the Oregon coast like a patient ghost, brushing over the faded rooftops of Pine Hollow before climbing the lone hill where an old windmill stood, its blades crooked, unmoving, as though frozen mid-breath. Michael Grant tightened his worn leather jacket and leaned on the hood of his pickup, gazing up at the silhouette. The ad had said, "Abandoned windmill, 5,000 as is," and that phrase as clung to his mind like a challenge. He was a man who couldn't leave broken things alone, not machines, not memories. At 40, Michael looked older than he was, carved by years of sawdust, rain, and the silent ache of loss. His dark hair had thinned at the temples, streaked with gray that caught the light like threads of old steel. His hands, broad, calloused, bearing tiny nicks from years of woodworking, rested against the truck bed. There was steadiness in him, the kind that came from surviving what he never spoke about, the night his wife, Emily, had died in a car accident while he was deployed overseas. Since then, silence had been both punishment and companion. A bark pulled him from the fog of memory. Rex, his 5-year-old German shepherd, bounded from the truck, muscles rippling beneath his golden black coat. His ears stood sharp, his tail steady and proud. Rex had been trained as a military dog before Michael adopted him, a creature of instinct and loyalty. In a world where Michael spoke less and less, Rex was the one who listened. "Easy, boy," Michael said softly, but his voice cracked. Rex tilted his head, as if to remind him that they'd been through worse than this. The road that led to the windmill was lined with thistles and the remnants of forgotten fences. Pine Hollow had long stopped asking what stories the hill kept. The locals at Marty's Diner whispered that the windmill was cursed, that during stormy nights it spun on its own, even without wind, and people claimed they heard voices crying from within. Michael had smiled when the waitress, Sarah, told him that. Sarah was a small-town woman in her late 30s, tall and lean with long auburn hair, always tied in a low braid. Her eyes were a pale green, and though she laughed easily, there was a certain heaviness in the way she set down coffee cups, like someone who'd spent too many nights waiting for someone who never came home. She had said, "You fixing that thing, Grant? Some things ain't meant to be fixed, you know?" Michael had only replied, "Maybe I just want to see if it still remembers how to turn." Now, standing before the windmill, he understood her words. The structure loomed above him, wooden blades splintered, paint stripped by time. The body of the mill was gray stone, moss creeping up like veins, the windows blind with dust. But there was something else, something he couldn't quite name, a hum in the air, faint but steady, like a heartbeat trapped in the walls. He ran his fingers along the iron latch of the front door. It gave way too easily, the hinges sighing as if relieved. The air inside was damp and metallic. Dust swirled through the beam of his flashlight, landing on broken gears, rusted chains, and wooden planks warped by time. Rex padded in behind him, nose low to the ground. His tail stiffened. Michael noticed the marks on the inner wall, 3 long scratches, deep and deliberate, as though made by something not entirely human. He crouched, tracing the grooves. "Animal," he muttered, but they were too straight, too controlled. In the corner, he spotted an old workbench covered in cobwebs and a stack of yellowed papers weighed down by a metal tool. He brushed the dust off and found what looked like a fragment of a blueprint, gears, turbines, and notes written in tight cursive. The paper bore a name, faded but legible, E. Langford. Rex barked once, low and sharp. He was staring at the floorboards near the center of the room. Michael approached, shining his light there. Something glinted faintly between the cracks, a reflection, like a coin catching the last breath of daylight. He knelt, prying the boards gently with the flat end of a screwdriver from his jacket pocket. Beneath the rotten wood lay something smooth and cold. Metal. He cleared the debris until he saw a square outline embedded in the floor, a hatch, rusted, with a ring handle barely visible under grime. His heartbeat picked up. He pulled, but it didn't budge. The hinges were fused with age. He tried again, harder this time, until his palms ached. Rex barked louder, his paws scraping at the edges, claws clinking against the steel. "All right, easy," Michael breathed, sweat gathering under his collar. He grabbed a crowbar from the toolbox in his truck and wedged it under the ring. With a sharp heave, the hatch screeched open, the sound like something old exhaling its last secret. A wave of cold air rushed out, earthy, stale, almost mechanical. Michael shone his flashlight into the darkness below. A metal ladder descended into what seemed like a deep chamber. The air smelled of oil and dust, but not decay. He felt Rex's breath on his hand, steady but alert. "Stay here," he whispered, but Rex growled softly, as if refusing to obey. Michael sighed. "Fine, partner. Together, then." They began the descent. The metal rungs moaned under their weight. The light flickered against the curved walls, iron-lined, surprisingly intact. At the bottom, Michael stepped into a small circular room, maybe 10 feet wide. Shelves lined the walls, each stacked with objects covered in thick cloth. The beam of light caught on something metallic, an emblem shaped like a gear within a sun. He pulled off one of the coverings. Beneath it lay a strange device, a turbine no bigger than a dinner plate, wires coiled like veins. Next to it sat a box of old journals, their pages filled with calculations, sketches of wind currents, and notes on self-sustaining power systems. Michael exhaled. "What the hell is this?" he murmured. Rex sniffed at the ground, then suddenly froze, ears pricked. The dog began to growl, a low, guttural sound that sent a shiver up Michael's spine. "What is it, boy?" From somewhere deeper in the dark came a faint metallic clang, then another. Michael turned, shining his flashlight toward the noise. It flickered once, twice, and then died completely, plunging the room into blackness. He reached for the ladder, but Rex growled louder, stepping protectively in front of him. The air grew colder. He could hear something moving above them, faint footsteps on wood. And then, impossibly, the old windmill's blades creaked and began to turn. The sound of the windmill's blades moaning above was both haunting and mesmerizing. Each creak echoed down the narrow shaft, like a heartbeat trapped between time and metal. Michael steadied his breath as he stood at the bottom of the ladder, flashlight trembling faintly in his grasp. Rex pressed close to his leg, his amber eyes glowing in the beam, ears pivoting toward the sound of grinding gears overhead. The air down there was cooler, denser, a blend of oil, iron, and the faint tang of sea salt. Michael's boots crunched against a floor, littered with shavings of metal and dust. The light swept across the room and caught on the metallic gleam of stacked containers, dozens of them, lined up with military precision, their sides embossed with faded stenciled numbers. Each was sealed, save for one that stood slightly ajar. He approached it carefully. The lid was heavy, cold to the touch. Inside lay a clutter of strange instruments, brass dials, copper coils, and sheets of parchment covered in crisp, slanted handwriting. He picked up a notebook bound in cracked leather. The cover bore a single name embossed in gold leaf, E. Langford, Edward Langford. The name stirred a faint memory. Michael vaguely recalled hearing it once, in a documentary about wartime inventors accused of espionage. Langford, an engineer of German descent, had designed renewable wind turbines decades ahead of their time, but had vanished in 1943, accused of leaking classified mechanical designs. The charges were never proven. His name was buried with the Cold War's paranoia. Michael flipped through the pages, careful not to tear the fragile paper. Equations filled the margins, diagrams of turbine blades that curved like seashells, notes about kinetic storage through harmonic wind resonance. Whoever this man had been, he was far ahead of his era. The idea that this forgotten genius had been silenced, and that his creation still slumbered beneath an Oregon hill, sent a current of awe and unease through Michael's chest. Rex pawed at another crate, whining softly. "Hold on, boy," Michael muttered, setting the notebook down. He pried open the lid of the second box. Inside were blueprints sealed in glass tubes, labeled Mark III Prototype, 1942. Each diagram was more intricate than the last, a network of gears, blades, and what looked like a system for converting wind power into stored energy without fuel. "This could change everything," he whispered, and they buried it. His words hung in the still air. Then Rex growled, "Whoa, guttural." Michael followed the dog's gung toward the far wall, where a faint red dot blinked intermittently. He froze. A camera, a modern one, sleek, black, barely visible against the metal. Someone was watching. He approached it slowly, shielding the flashlight beam with his hand. The lens shifted minutely, tracking movement. A chill ran down his spine. The wiring disappeared into the wall, leading to a conduit that looked newly installed. Whoever had placed it there had access and interest in this place. Michael's military instincts, long dormant, began to stir. He pulled the plug free from the wall with a sharp tug, sparks spitting. The blinking ceased. "Not today," he muttered. Rex wagged his tail once, as if satisfied. Back on the surface, the evening light had dimmed into gray twilight. The blades of the windmill had stopped moving, hanging lifeless once more. Michael locked the hatch and drove home in silence, his mind racing through possibilities. If the site was monitored, then the question wasn't why, but by whom? His small house at the edge of town creaked with the familiar loneliness of old wood. Rex lay by the fireplace, his head resting on his paws, while Michael spread the notebooks across the table. The handwriting was elegant but precise, every line drawn with a scientist's patience. He read until the clock struck midnight. Phrases leapt from the pages: self-sustaining circuit, magnetic resonance chamber, humanity's energy independence. Then a final line, underlined twice: "If they silence me, the wind will speak for me." He leaned back, rubbing his eyes. This could clear Langford's name, he thought. If he could restore the mechanism, perhaps it could even function, prove its inventor right. A knock startled him, 3 soft raps on the door. Rex rose instantly, growling low. Michael grabbed the wrench from the table and approached the door cautiously. When he opened it, a woman stood in the porch light. She was in her 50s, short, with silver hair pulled into a bun, wearing a long brown coat and thick glasses that magnified her hazel eyes. Her posture was rigid but not unkind. Mr. Grant?" she asked, voice calm but firm. "Yes?" "My name is Dr. Ellen Park. I work with the University of Oregon's Department of Engineering History. I believe you recently acquired the Langford Windmill." Michael's stomach tightened. "You believe correctly. How did you—" She held up a small card. "We monitor all heritage auctions. The property has academic significance." Her gaze flicked to the papers on his table. "May I?" He hesitated. Something about her tone carried both authority and a quiet warning. "Sure," he said finally. "But I'm not selling anything. I'm not here to buy," she replied. "I'm here to make sure you understand what you've found." Dr. Park stepped inside, scanning the notebooks with surprising delicacy. "Langford wasn't a spy," she murmured, almost to herself. "He was trying to change the world." Michael watched her closely. "Then why was he accused?" "Because progress frightens people," she said simply. Her eyes softened as she looked up at him. "Especially during a war." They spoke for nearly an hour. Dr. Park explained that several corporations had once funded Langford's research. When the government seized his property in the 1940s, his discoveries disappeared into private archives. "If someone placed cameras in that cellar," she added, "then his work still threatens someone." Before leaving, she handed Michael her card. "Be careful, Mr. Grant. Curiosity is noble, but some truths come with ownership." After she left, Michael sat in silence. Rex nudged his leg, whining softly. "I know, buddy," he whispered. "We're in deep now." He returned to the windmill the next day before dawn, unable to shake the feeling that the place wasn't done with him yet. The sky was pale and cold, streaked with amber clouds. The hatch creaked as he descended once more into the cellar. This time, the air felt different, charged, humming faintly like before a storm. He found the power conduit he had pulled and noticed something new. A small black device blinking green, wedged between 2 crates. A transmitter. His pulse quickened. He picked it up, turning it in his hands. The label beneath read, "Property of Langford Industries." The name sent a jolt through him. Langford Industries had been dissolved decades ago, absorbed into a modern energy conglomerate. Someone had reactivated its shadow. Then, without warning, a sharp click echoed behind him. He turned. Too late. The metal door of the hatch above slammed shut. The sound reverberated through the chamber. Rex barked furiously, claws scraping against the floor. Michael rushed to the ladder, pulling at it, but the hatch wouldn't move. The faint smell of smoke began to rise from somewhere near the far wall. A hiss, then a low rumble, something mechanical shifting in the dark. "Rex, back!" he shouted, dragging the dog toward the corner. The air shimmered, hot and electric. A small explosion ripped through one of the conduits, showering sparks. The lights flickered once, Then everything went black. And for the first time, in that suffocating dark, Michael heard it. A voice, faint, metallic, whispering from one of the machines, "You shouldn't have come back." The darkness pressed in like a living thing. Smoke curled through the cellar, turning the beam of Michael's flickering flashlight into a dim halo. The metallic voice had gone silent, leaving behind only the groaning of heated metal and Rex's low growl. Michael's palms were slick with sweat as he pressed against the hatch again. It didn't move. He coughed, pulling his sleeve over his mouth. "Easy, boy," he muttered to Rex, though his own voice shook. The German shepherd stood tense, nostrils flaring, hackles raised. Then the dog darted toward the far wall, barking sharply. Michael followed his line of sight, and there, half hidden behind a cabinet, was a rusted ventilation duct. It was small, the kind used decades ago for airflow between sublevels. He kicked at the cover, dislodging it with a clang. "You're kidding me," he whispered. It was narrow, but it was a way out. Rex looked up at him, ears perked, as if to say, "You first." Michael hesitated only a second. He tore off his jacket, stuffed the notebooks into his shirt, and crawled in, the metal groaning beneath his weight. The air smelled of rust and damp earth. Behind him, Rex followed, paws clinking against the iron. The crawl felt endless. Each breath came shallow, scraping against dust and cobwebs. Then, finally, a faint orange glow ahead, a shaft of morning light through a loose grate. Michael kicked it free, tumbling out onto wet grass. The hilltop air hit him like a shock of life. He turned just in time to see Rex leap out beside him, shaking soot from his fur. The windmill loomed behind them, its blades eerily still. But they weren't alone. Down by the dirt road, a black SUV idled, its headlights slicing through the mist. The engine revved once, sharp and impatient. Michael squinted through the glare, just long enough to glimpse the driver, a man in his late 50s, heavy-set, with slicked-back gray hair and the self-assured posture of someone who'd spent a lifetime selling things he didn't own. Gerald Hunt. Michael recognized him instantly, the real estate broker who had sold him the property. At the time, Hunt had seemed harmless, the kind of man who smiled too much and listened too little. He'd worn a tan blazer a size too tight, his watch always catching the light, like he wanted everyone to notice it. His handshake had been firm but clammy, his voice honeyed. "Just a fixer-upper," he had said with a grin. "All yours, friend." Now, Hunt's expression through the windshield wasn't friendly at all. He stared at Michael for a long, cold moment, then slammed the accelerator. The SUV sped down the road, gravel spraying. Michael shouted after him, but the sound vanished into the wind. He turned to Rex, chest heaving. "He knew," he muttered. "He knew what was down there." The rest of the day passed in a haze of questions and half-formed plans. Michael drove home with the windows down, the wind whipping through Rex's fur. Every few miles, he glanced at the rearview mirror, half expecting the black SUV to appear again. It never did. Still, the sense of being watched clung to him. When he reached town, the sheriff's cruiser was already parked outside his house. Sheriff Dan Rogers stepped out as Michael pulled in, a thick-set man in his late 40s, with sunburned skin and a mustache that looked like it belonged to another decade. He carried the steady weariness of someone who'd seen too many small-town arguments escalate into lifelong grudges. "Morning, Grant," he called, voice gravelly but not unkind. "Got some complaints about a disturbance up by the windmill. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Michael hesitated. "There was a fire," he said carefully, "and someone locked me inside. I had to break out." Rogers frowned. "You broke out of your own property? It's not what it sounds like. Son, in this town, everything's exactly what it sounds like." Rogers sighed, taking off his hat to scratch his head. "You're a good man, Grant. Folks like you keep things running around here, but some of them think you're stirring up old trouble. They like that hill quiet." Michael bit back his frustration. "That hill's hiding something," he said. "You can ask Dr. Ellen Park from the university. Rogers cut him off with a raised hand. "I know Dr. Park. Smart woman, too smart to get mixed up in legends. Let's keep it that way." He gave Rex a wary glance before turning back. "Just take it easy. Fix your windmill, sell it if you have to. Leave the ghost stories to the tourists." When the sheriff drove off, Michael stood alone in the gravel drive, jaw tight. He knew what he'd seen, the crates, the designs, the camera, and Hunt's face. The town might not believe him, but that didn't matter anymore. Later that evening, Michael drove to his workshop, a cramped space behind Marty's diner. The sign on the door read, Grant and Comey Carpentry, though the Coney had always just meant Rex. Inside, the familiar scent of sawdust and oil should have been comforting, but tonight it wasn't. He had barely stepped inside when his manager, Ben Larkin, appeared from the back office. Ben was a broad-shouldered man in his mid-40s with a square jaw, streaks of white in his beard, and permanent worry lines etched between his brows. He had once served with Michael overseas and had offered him a job out of friendship rather than need. But now his expression was hard. "Mike," he began, voice heavy, "we got a problem. Sheriff says you've been trespassing, causing damage up there. The owner's threatening legal action." "I am the owner," Michael snapped. Ben rubbed his temples. "Doesn't matter. They're saying you caused an explosion. Insurance won't touch that. I have to let you go." The words hit harder than he expected. He looked at Ben, searching for understanding. "You know me, Ben. You—" "No, I wouldn't." "I know," Ben said quietly. "But people are scared. Whatever you found up there, let it go. Some things aren't worth fixing." Michael left without another word. The workshop lights flickered behind him as the door closed. On the street, Rex pressed against his leg, sensing his turmoil. "It's just us now," Michael said softly. The dog's tail gave a faint wag, as if in answer. That night, Michael spread the salvaged blueprints across his kitchen floor. He studied them under the pale light of a single bulb, tracing each line, each formula. Rex lay beside him, chin on his paws, eyes alert. Suddenly, the dog lifted his head, sniffing the air. He stood, padded to the corner, and pawed at Michael's toolbox. Inside, beneath a pile of wrenches, was a small torn piece of parchment, a fragment of the missing blueprint, stained with oil. Michael frowned. "Where did you—" He stopped. The smell, not oil, something chemical, faintly metallic. He touched it to his nose. "Ammonium chloride," he muttered. He'd used it in woodworking once, but not recently. Someone had been here. He followed Rex outside, flashlight cutting through the dark. The air smelled faintly of exhaust and damp earth. Down the gravel road, tire tracks curved toward the highway, fresh, deep, and unmistakable. Michael crouched, brushing his fingers over the tread marks. "SUV," he said. "Same damn one." Rex sniffed, then barked twice, turning toward the hills. He bolted ahead, nose to the ground, pulling Michael with surprising strength. They followed the trail until the trees swallowed the last of the streetlights. Then, through the dark, Michael saw it, a faint glimmer in the distance. Not headlights this time, something smaller, steadier. He approached slowly, heart pounding. Resting at the edge of the woods was a metal briefcase, half buried in dirt, the initials EL etched on its surface. Michael knelt, brushing the soil away. The latch was locked, rusted tight. He looked at Rex, who stared back with unblinking eyes. "Well," he whispered, "looks like Langford left us one more secret." Behind them, somewhere far down the road, the low hum of an engine stirred again. The night pressed heavy on the hills, cloaked in mist that glowed faintly beneath a fractured moon. Michael crouched beside the metal briefcase half buried in dirt, his breath visible in the cold air. Rex stood alert beside him, fur bristling, ears trained toward the distant hum of the approaching engine. The initials EL etched into the briefcase shimmered under the flashlight beam, a ghostly signature from another century. "Langford," Michael whispered. "It's him." His fingers worked at the rusted latch until it snapped open with a reluctant click. Inside were weathered documents, a handful of glass cylinders containing microfilm, and one pristine envelope sealed in red wax. The envelope bore the symbol he had seen engraved in the cellar, a sun encircling a gear. Inside, a faded letter unfolded in fragile creases. The ink had bled, but the words remained. "If this reaches you, the Windmill lives. They took my name, not my work. Someday, someone will listen to the wind again." It was signed, Edward Langford, 1943. Michael's heart pounded. He looked at Rex, whose eyes caught the light like twin embers. "We're going to clear his name," he murmured. "If it kills me." A roar of tires ripped through the silence. The SUV's headlights exploded across the clearing. Michael grabbed the case and ran for the tree line. A voice shouted behind him, harsh, male, commanding. "Grant, stop right there!" A gunshot split the air. Dirt exploded near his boots. Rex barked, charging back toward the noise. "Rex, no!" Michael shouted, but the dog was already leaping into the dark. The SUV's door slammed, and a man stepped into the light. Gerald Hunt, no longer the smiling salesman, but something colder. His slick gray hair clung to his forehead, his face drawn tight, sweat gleaming on his temples. The cheap charm was gone, replaced by desperation. "You should have walked away, Grant," he hissed, leveling a pistol. "You think you're the first one to dig this up? They buried Langford for a reason." Michael's grip tightened on the briefcase. "And who's they, Hunt? The same people paying you to watch me?" Before Hunt could answer, Rex lunged from the side, teeth sinking into his arm. The gun went off, wild and loud. Hunt screamed, staggering. Michael dove, grabbing Rex's collar, pulling him back as Hunt fell against the car door, clutching his bleeding arm. "You're both dead!" Hunt snarled. He jumped into the SUV and reversed violently, tearing down the dirt road, tires spitting gravel. Michael's ears rang from the shot. Rex whimpered, favoring one leg. Blood streaked his fur. "No, no, no, stay still, boy," Michael whispered, tearing off his shirt sleeve to bind the wound. The dog licked his hand weakly, but stayed alert. The engine sound faded into the distance, swallowed by wind. Michael cradled Rex's head, his voice trembling. "You're not dying on me. Not now." He glanced toward the hill where the windmill stood, its outline black against the cloudy sky. A thought sparked, desperate, half mad. The old turbines, the wiring, the control systems Langford had built. If they still worked, maybe he could use them, not just for power, but to send the truth. He lifted Rex into the truck bed and sped up the winding road toward the windmill. The building loomed like a guardian of secrets, its frame creaking in the rising wind. Rain began to fall, thin, needling drops that shimmered in the headlights. He carried Rex inside, laid him on a pile of old burlap, and went to the control panel. The old switchboard was coated in grime, wires frayed, meters frozen mid-read. Yet there, hidden behind a rusted plate, he found what he was looking for, a small brass switch labeled Transmission. Michael took a deep breath. "All right, Langford, let's see if your ghost still works." He began connecting wires, using every bit of electrical training he'd learned years ago, repairing generators in the Army. Sparks flew, but he didn't stop. Outside, the wind began to howl louder, pressing against the broken windows like a storm coming alive. The blades creaked once, twice, then began to move. Slowly at first, then faster, slicing through the night with a rhythmic groan. Rex stirred, whining softly. Michael glanced back at him. "Hang on, partner. Almost there." The generator coughed, then roared to life. The control lights flickered, and the old machinery began to hum with renewed energy. Michael fed one of the microfilms into a scanner, connecting it to his battered laptop. The screen came alive. Langford's notes, blueprints, even a recorded statement, grainy but clear. If progress is silenced, the wind itself will cry for justice. Michael felt his throat tighten. He hit upload, routing the signal through the tower's radio uplink. But then, headlights again. The SUV screeched to a halt outside, doors slamming. Hunt had returned, this time with another man. Younger, tall, dressed in black tactical gear. The newcomer's face was sharp and pale, with a close-cropped beard and eyes that glimmered like polished steel. Agent Cole Maddox. "Grant!" Maddox shouted through the rain, voice cutting like glass. "Step away from the machine." His posture was military perfect, his stance balanced. A man used to control. "You have no idea what you're interfering with." Michael shouted back, "You're protecting a lie." Maddox advanced, gun raised. "You think this is about truth? This is about keeping chaos out of the hands of people who don't understand it." Langford wanted clean energy, not chaos. Langford wanted freedom, Maddox said, almost bitterly. "And freedom kills empires." Rex barked weakly, drawing Maddox's attention. That instant was enough. Michael threw the main breaker. The entire windmill roared to life. The lights flared, and the turbines outside spun. So fast the air itself seemed to vibrate. Sparks danced across the metal framework. Maddox cursed, shielding his eyes. "You'll blow the whole place." "That's the idea," Michael shouted, yanking the brass switch. The old transmission tower blazed, the circuit screaming. Lightning seemed to strike the blades themselves, energy pulsing through them, amplified by Langford's design. The laptop's progress bar hit 100%. The files were live, broadcast to every public data channel still active. Then, silence. The power flickered out. The blades slowed. The air smelled of ozone and burnt copper. Michael collapsed beside Rex, breathing hard. The SUV was gone, Hunt and Maddox retreating into the storm. The only sound left was the wind, soft again, carrying a whisper that might have been nothing, or words. "Thank you." He looked at Rex, who lifted his head weakly, eyes bright with trust. "We did it, buddy," Michael said, voice breaking. "The world's going to know." Above them, for the first time in decades, the windmill's blades spun freely under their own power, glowing faintly in the moonlight, alive once more. Morning broke like a whisper over Pine Hollow, washing the hills in soft gold. The windmill stood tall again, its blades gleaming under the sun as if time itself had decided to forgive it. Months had passed since that storm, since the night the world finally learned the truth about Edward Langford. The footage Michael had uploaded spread like wildfire, across news broadcasts, academic forums, and government hearings. The forgotten windmill engineer became a national symbol of integrity and innovation lost to greed. And somewhere amid that whirlwind, Michael Grant, a quiet carpenter who once just wanted to fix things, found himself at the center of a story much larger than his own. Rex padded beside him, healed but limping slightly, his gait uneven but proud. The fur on his right leg had grown back, though the faint scar beneath shimmered in the light like a badge of honor. Michael reached down and scratched behind his ears. "Still walking straighter than me," he murmured with a grin. Rex's tail thumped once against the wooden railing. The windmill was no longer abandoned. Scaffolding and solar panels dotted the property now, and a modest visitor center had risen near the base of the hill. The sign out front read, "Langford Community Energy Center," letters carved by Michael himself. Inside, displays told the story of Langford's work, the suppression of his research, and the carpenter who had uncovered it all. That morning, a small crowd gathered at the hilltop for the dedication ceremony. Reporters adjusted their cameras, children chased one another across the grass, and the smell of rain lingered faintly in the air. Michael tugged at the collar of his shirt, uncomfortable in the formal clothes that felt foreign on his shoulders. He would have rather been in his flannel and work boots. A voice behind him broke the quiet. "You clean up well, Mr. Grant." He turned to see a woman approaching, tall, graceful, with auburn hair pulled into a neat bun and glasses that framed eyes the color of green glass. Clara Langford. The resemblance to her grandfather's old photographs was unmistakable. Same high cheekbones, same calm intelligence. She wore a navy coat and carried a leather folder tucked under one arm. Her presence carried both poise and warmth, the kind of confidence earned through purpose, not ego. Michael nodded awkwardly. "Dr. Langford, I presume?" "Clara, please." She extended her hand, firm and steady. "You've done something extraordinary here." "I just fixed what was already broken," he said, eyes drifting toward the windmill. Clara smiled faintly. "That's what my grandfather always tried to do, too. Fix what the world broke." They stood together in silence for a moment, the wind brushing against their faces. Down below, the mayor of Pine Hollow, Robert Hayes, a stout man with a ruddy complexion and an impressive mustache, fumbled with a microphone. Hayes had once been skeptical of Michael, dismissing him as a troublemaker, but politics had a way of bending with public opinion, and today he was all smiles. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hayes boomed, "today we honor not only a great American inventor, but the man who gave him back his voice." Applause rippled through the crowd. Michael felt his stomach tighten. He had never wanted attention. The flash of cameras, the cheer of strangers, it all felt unreal. Still, when Clara nudged him gently toward the podium, he stepped forward. Rex followed, sitting at his side, head high and eyes steady on the crowd. Michael cleared his throat. "I'm no scientist," he began, voice rough with nerves. "I'm just a carpenter who wanted to fix a windmill. But I found a man's story buried there. A man who tried to give the world something cleaner, kinder, and was punished for it. I guess sometimes the truth hides in the rust and dust, waiting for someone stubborn enough to dig it out." He paused, glancing down at Rex. "I didn't do this alone. My partner here," he added, ruffling the dog's fur, "has better instincts than I ever will. If not for him, I might still be in that cellar." The crowd laughed softly, warm and genuine. As the ceremony ended, a representative from the Department of Energy stepped forward. Evelyn Clark, a woman in her 60s with short silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. Her navy suit was immaculate, but the lines on her face spoke of long years spent fighting bureaucratic battles. She handed Michael a small medal encased in glass. "For courage in preserving the legacy of American innovation," she said. He accepted it quietly, nodding his thanks. But what moved him most wasn't the medal. It was when Clara knelt to pin a small badge onto Rex's collar, engraved with the words, "Honor Guard." "For bravery," she said, smiling at the German shepherd. Rex wagged his tail, tongue lolling happily as cameras clicked. Over the next few weeks, the Langford Center became more than just a monument. Students came to learn about renewable energy, engineers came to study Langford's blueprints, and volunteers helped Michael rebuild the turbines so they could once again generate real power, not for corporations, but for the town itself. Evenings were Michael's favorite time. The crowds would leave, the air would cool, and the wind would hum softly through the restored blades. He'd sit on the porch of the visitor center with Rex at his feet, a cup of coffee in hand, and watch the sunset spill across the valley. Sometimes Clara joined him, their conversations quiet but full of meaning. She was curious and driven, always asking about his process, his philosophy, his life before the windmill. He told her bits and pieces, about Emily, about the silence that followed her death, about how he thought fixing something broken might fix him too. Clara listened with the patience of someone who understood loss. "Maybe that's what healing is," she said one evening, "building something new out of what's left." Michael looked at her, then at Rex, then at the spinning blades. "Maybe," he said softly. By early spring, the project was complete. The windmill turned steadily, feeding clean energy to the town below. Reporters dubbed it the miracle on Green Hill. People came from miles away just to stand beneath it, to hear the faint hum of history alive again. One afternoon, the sky was clear and warm, and the grass shimmered like emerald glass. Michael stood by the railing, hands in his pockets, watching the windmill spin. Rex sat beside him, ears flicking at the sound of birds. "You know," Michael said quietly, "sometimes even the wind needs someone to listen." Rex looked up, tail thumping once, and gave a soft, almost knowing bark. Michael smiled, resting his hand on the dog's head as the blades turned above them, slicing sunlight into silver ribbons. For the first time in years, he felt the world was still, not silent, but at peace. And somewhere, carried on that steady, endless wind, was the voice of Edward Langford, whispering his thanks. Sometimes miracles don't come with thunder or light. Sometimes they arrive quietly, in the creak of an old windmill, the wag of a loyal tail, or the whisper of a man who refused to give up. Michael didn't just fix wood and metal, he restored faith. The faith that goodness still lives in ordinary hearts, and that truth, no matter how long it sleeps, will always rise again when someone dares to listen. And maybe that's what God does best. He hides his miracles in small acts of courage, in the hands that build, the hearts that forgive, and the souls that keep believing when the world turns dark. So, tonight, as you breathe, as you look at the world around you, remember this. Every broken thing still holds a spark of grace, waiting for someone like you to see it. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment below and tell us what your windmill is. That one forgotten dream still waiting to turn again. Share this story with someone who needs hope today, and don't forget to subscribe. So, together we can keep the light turning, and may God bless you and all those you love.